Well, welcome back to Nightly Nonsense. We're trying to make some sense out of the nonsense all around. We focus this week in God. What does God think about this thing? How do we know what makes sense to God and what makes nonsense to God, right? Things that we've declared make a whole bunch of sense, and things that God says, nope, that's not sense. And things that we've declared nonsense, and God says, no, that makes a lot of sense to me, right? We got to be careful with this whole thing, right? So we just talked about how you apply it, right? How you go about what you do in this whole thing. Right? Declaring God's word, declaring God's sense, right? It's important, right? Peter stood up in Acts chapter 2 and he declares God's sense. He says, listen, here's the deal. Notice the people responded. 3,000 people were added. Paul gets up and explains God's sense. Then he gets dragged out of the city and he gets stoned, right? There's a difference in reaction. We need to anticipate that. You need to anticipate that God's sense is going to create, right? Both a appetite for the sense and an appetite for I'd rather have nonsense. We don't want this. We don't want to listen to you, right? There are people that are around you that you know their life would be better. The nonsense would start to make sense if they had a relationship with Jesus. You know that. But when they look at you, they don't want what you have. They love what they have. They think they're successful. They've made it. They got all the right people in all the right places, right? They have made themselves. It's funny because frequently I'll see pictures of people on Facebook. You will see them too, or somewhere else. And you see a picture and you go like, wait a minute. I know it says that this person is who this is, but they don't even resemble who they are. Like they're starting to look totally different. What happened? A lot of times, that's what happens when we decide that we're going to live in nonsense. So we're going to live in a nonsensical way. God turns us over to that nonsense. Sooner or later, we become unrecognizable. That's the problem with compromise. When you and I start to compromise on God's sense, we start to become unrecognizable. Like, what's this person doing at the bar tonight, acting like everybody else? What's this person yelling at the cashier for like everybody else? What's this person walking around, right, the sick and dying person on the sidewalk? What's this person who's going on rants about how much he hates anybody who voted for this type of person? What happens? We start compromising. People start seeing nonsense appear over us. We're not looking at people with God's sense. People aren't looking at us and seeing God's sense. Instead, they're looking at us and seeing there's some nonsense. Right? All of a sudden, we're not being God to people. We're not being Jesus to people. And then that creates confusion. And we're not able to pull them out of their nonsense. Some people just want to stay in the nonsense. The nonsense is benefiting them. Other people get so desperate that they're so desperate to get out of their nonsense that they're just going to cling to God for a second, hoping that he's going to get them out. Right? There's a big difference between falling overboard, being in the middle of a lake, having somebody come out and throw you a life preserver so that you can stay afloat, and somebody pulling you onto their boat and taking care of you. Like, there's a big, big difference. We're running around with life preservers all the time with people who are struggling. They're drowning in nonsense, and we're throwing out life preservers. And here, this will help you. Just read this book, read this pamphlet, go here, do this, come to our church, right? But it's up to that person to make their way to shore and take care of themselves. We're to come up alongside people and help them make some sense out of the nonsense. But that has to be done with people who want to be drowning. The person who want to be saved from drowning. The person who's drowning, who doesn't want to be saved, you're not going to help them. You're going to throw them a life preserver, they're going to throw it back. Right? You're going to pull them on their boat, they're going to jump back over. Right? I've seen that lots of times. Right? You went through a stage saving baby birds. They fall out of their nest, they're not quite ready to fly yet. So you pick them up, you put them back in their nest. Guess what happens? They jump out again or they die. But they don't want to be saved. They don't want to be fixed. They don't think there's anything wrong with them, right? These are the things. We can't make sense out of the nonsense for people who don't want anything to do with it. Shouting line here and a shouting line here, shouting at each other, it's not going to work, right? We want to come up alongside people and make sense out of their nonsense for them, because that's what God has said to do. And that's what they want, right? There's a reason why Jesus asked some people, what do you want? There's a reason why you have to confess that Jesus Christ is Lord with your own mouth, right? There's a reason why for all of this stuff. You have to make the decision. You have to look around. I want to talk about that tomorrow night. We'll see you back here again. Nightly Nonsense.